Hello and welcome to the podcast where me, Eli,
Allie.
And Josh.
will be talking about Veronica Roth's Divergent series. Today we're going to be talking about the first book, Divergent. Divergent is very interesting in my opinion. It's got so many different unique traits that make it a great dystopian novel about Triss and Four. What do you think, Allie?
Well, I really think that the idea of factions is really interesting and how they all have different beliefs of how the world went wrong. Like Abnegation believes it was selfishness. What do you think about this, Josh?
Yeah. People were born into factions, some of them. Well, yes, all of them. So every 16 years, every person who becomes 16, they choose their faction, and they can either stay with their own faction or, depending on their beliefs, they go with another faction.
Yeah, so at the choosing ceremony, they choose their factions. And there's 5 factions, I believe. Am I correct, Allie?
Yes, you are.
And those factions are...
Those factions are Candor, Erudite, Abnegation, Dauntless, and Amity.
And so, like you said, each of those factions have different beliefs of the world. Abnegation to be selfless, Candor to be truthful and never tell a lie, Amity to be peaceful, and Erudite, knowledge. They believe that ignorance was the problem. And finally, thank you, Josh, Dauntless was to be...
Brave.
Yes, fearless. So now we're moving on. Do you think what faction do you think Triss will pick? She's born in abnegation. Her brother is always leading upon her, telling her what to do. But sometimes she expresses displeasure for the whole selfless idea. Like she's not selfless enough. She feels like she doesn't belong. What do you think will happen because of this?
Well, I really believe since she's always mentioning how she's always looking out at the Dauntless and she's kind of seeming like she's longing to be there, it seems like if she was really being true to herself, she would pick it. Or it could be possible that she would stay with Abnegation because she wants to make her parents proud. What do you think about this, Josh?
Well, this does put a lot of pressure on Beatrice, so if she stays home, she will not really feel that great, but if she goes to Dauntless, she may actually find something she really likes.
What if she blows us all away and goes to Amity or some other place? She says she, what is this word? Admires Dauntless. She thinks she's impressed by their lack of fear and they're always wanting to try new things. But I feel that there is a very thin line between bravery and stupidity. So is Dauntless the really best choice for her? Maybe Erudite? Who knows? Maybe she should just stay at Abnegation. We do know that her dad is one of the leaders, so that has a big influence on her. And if she leaves, what could that cause? I believe there was a story about, who was it? There was a boy who left Abnegation. Allie, tell us more.
Well, they said that there's this boy named Tobias who left Abnegation, and he said that he left because the Erudite said that it was because his father was abusive, and we don't really believe that because they make up fake stories about that all the time about things like that. So for him, and it was shameful for the entire Abnegation community. So for Beatrice to leave, people would consider it shameful, and their parents would most likely be unhappy with her.
Josh?
Well, other factions sort of make up or have little rivalries with each other, like Candor and Amity, because the Candorans say that the Amity will say whatever they can to keep the water calm. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Allie and Josh are both really right. How Josh is right about how they have their little rivalries, and Erudite blames Abnegation for a lot of the stuff. They write newspapers about them with stories that are false, and it all is sparked from the 2 leaders. Who's the leader of Erudite? I believe it's, what's her name?
Janine Matthews, I'm pretty sure.
Janine Matthews, and she's like the top scientist. She's the representative, and the government. The government's a big part of this. Who's the government led by, Josh?
No.
The government is led by...
Abnegation.
Oh, thanks, Josh.
Since they're selfless, I think they would want like this whole everybody gets a say.
Yeah. So even though abnegation does lead the government, they still have like very varied beliefs. Let everybody put in their points of view, but there's this whole idea in the book that because erudite have so much knowledge, they want more. They want more power. They have a hunger for control, which because of their knowledge, they believe that they're in charge. But do you think that's really the best thing, depending on Janine Matthews and her faction's behavior, Allie?
I really don't think that would be the best idea for the erudite to rule, because seeing how Janine Matthews manipulates people all the time, it seems like having her controlling the government would almost be like a dictator. Because if she doesn't get how she likes it, then she basically will kill people. And she tests experiments on people who are maybe a little bit different from other people just to get the correct information. It's pretty much heartless. What do you think about it, Josh?
Well, somebody like that would not. People, in one of the chapters, I think it was like in the teens, like near 16, they said that like the ideas of factions have changed from what the original thing was. Like the hunger for knowledge that the erudites now have was different from their just, they wanted to learn more.
Yeah. It's more of like a hunger for power. They really just want control. That could mean that they have other plans in mind. Do they want to expand, go outside the fence? We know that you're not supposed to go there. All right, we seem to have skipped over a major part, which is for the choosing of the factions, the test. The aptitude test. Yes, the aptitude test is very, very important. The aptitude test does what, Allie and Josh?
The aptitude test pretty much takes from a simulation what kind of skill you choose or defend yourself with, and decides what you would be best in with your beliefs in what faction.
So you said a simulation there. How do they conduct the simulation? Josh, do you know?
Well, they're put in this chair, like a metal chair, and they're connected with a bunch of wires. And they also sometimes have this needle that they use that transmits like simulations of what their fear would be.
Yeah, so this needle, they inject you with a serum, and according to Four, who is actually number 1 in his class for initiation's another thing we're going to talk about. What the simulation does is it sparks your amygdala, which is the part of your brain that creates fear, and it shows you stuff that will like show you what, depending on what your decisions are, it'll show you what factions are best for you. And the serum, each faction has their own unique serum. So as we know, depending on their beliefs. So yeah, Candor, I believe it's the truth serum. It forces you to tell the truth. Dauntless is the fear serum, which is the one about the amygdala. And the erudite use the faction serum, so it chooses your faction. It's very interesting. So this big part of the story is Triss's aptitude test results. Can you tell us the word for it, Allie?
Yeah, the word for it is divergent, and they usually divergent, you only get 2 different faction results, but the weird thing about hers, she got 3 different faction results, which was abnegation, dauntless, and erudite.
So divergence is extremely rare, correct, Josh?
Yes, it's when people can actually manipulate and know that it's a simulation.
Yeah, so most people, they think they're in real life when they're in the simulation. They can't tell if it's changed or not. But divergent people, they're aware. They're like awake. So they can tell if they're in the simulation, and then they're actually able to manipulate the simulation so that they can like survive and stuff in the simulation and overcome their fears. It's very interesting. So your aptitude test results are only supposed to give you one faction, and that faction is supposed to advise you on which faction to pick at the choosing ceremony. Now again, the choosing ceremony is a choice of your own, so you don't have to pick the faction that you get, but it's extremely uncommon. Now divergence is where your test results are inconclusive. Inconclusive means that, what, Josh? You have multiple factions, I believe, is that correct?
Yes, with multiple factions, well, you can choose, but
Yeah. When you choose the factions, it makes it extremely hard. And so there's this whole thing about Janine Matthews. Well, people fear the Divergent. They think they have superpowers or they're bad. And that's influenced by Janine Matthews. Because they can manipulate the serums, it makes them bad to them. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Divergence can mean a whole different things. So as we get later on, we find out that Janine Matthews is trying to hunt down and kill the Divergent because she believes they're a threat. But how could they be a threat? They can just manipulate the serums.
Well, the reason they'd be a threat is because she wants to put everyone under a simulation to be brain dead and follow her as a brain dead army. And if the Divergent can manipulate her simulations, then she can't control everybody.
Allie, you're saying that Janine Matthews has her plans to take over the city where they live and use Dauntless because Dauntless are the fighters and the strength people of the city. She's gonna inject them with a serum so that they get manipulated and take over the population. What about these other factions that are not part of it? Is that just because Erudite has wants to overthrow the government and take over Abnegation? What would Candor think? What would Amity think?
Well, you're correct about the reason she's throwing over Abnegation, because she wants to be in charge of the government. And Amity really didn't want to get involved. They wanted to keep the water calm, so they weren't getting involved. And Candor, still like Amity, they weren't going to get involved because of who knows why, because maybe I guess they were just afraid. So if she has everyone being controlled, then, I mean, why wouldn't you be afraid of her? What do you think about it, Josh?
Well, I mean, if everybody was brainwashed, they would want to have their freedom to think, right? So if they were able to, stay out of it and stay, able to think and stay conscious, then, they would be moderately happy.
They would be moderately happy, but remember, this is a serum. Unless you're Divergent, you can't tell you're under the serum. You think it's all real life. So, according to them, the only thing that's going through their heads is their mission, which is to slaughter the Abnegation leaders. What do you think would be the result of this? What if they wake up in the middle of it? When the simulation ends, what would happen? Janine Matthews is in control with all these Dauntless. Do you think when the Dauntless wake up from the serum and it's finally over, that they'll like what they did or they'll refuse it? What do you think will happen? Will they stick with Janine, or will they try to support Abnegation and help?
I think since they have they would probably get angry at the Erudites because, Janine, because it's cowardly to brainwash people and to make them fight for you when you should be fighting your own battles with your own people. So, yeah.
I believe that waking up to killing an entire faction would be absolutely horrific, because I'm sure they would be very upset waking up and they've killed all the Abnegation leaders and all these innocent people. I'm sure that's not what Dauntless are for, because I'm sure they find killing innocent people cowardly.
Yes, the Dauntless don't want any fear. They think that being controlled is the worst thing. They want their own decisions. They want to survive on their own. Now, back to Beatrice and her test results. Hers were inconclusive, and she was the most interesting Divergent that there ever is. Her test conductor's name was Tori. Yes, Josh, Tori, and she seemed to know about the Divergent, but she didn't seem to have the same beliefs as Janine Matthews. That was very interesting. So, Triss's 3 options were Erudite, Abnegation, and Dauntless. And she ended up picking which faction, Allie?
Dauntless.
Why do you think she picked Dauntless? Did it have anything to involve her admiring them?
I'm sure it did, because she always seemed to long to be around them. So I'm sure seeing them all the time, she wanted to be there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, her brother ended up choosing Erudite. That's very interesting. Erudite end up controlling Dauntless. That's not good. Does that mean that her brother doesn't like Abnegation, which was his original faction? I don't know. We'll talk about this more in our next episode. Thank you for listening to Eli,
Josh,
and Allie.
over and out.